He drank blood to become a woman.
You ate Laura, cut her up in little pieces until she bled. You tasted the blood and that tasted good and you couldn't stop and you had some more blood, you had some more body parts.
Haddon Irving Clark was born on July 31st of 1952 in Troy, Connecticut. He had 3 other siblings and they were a wealthy, well-educated family, but behind closed doors, the household was filled with violence, instability, and deep dysfunction. Haddon's father had drinking problems and his mom was mentally ill. She wanted a daughter so badly that anytime she would drink too much, she would make Haddon dress in girls' clothes and then call him Kristen. And whenever he would do this, his father would get mad at him and hit him with a belt. Haddon struggled socially and academically, and from a very young age, he showed disturbing behavior. In his 20s, he enlisted in the Navy but was discharged due to erratic behavior. He was caught stealing and wearing women's underwear underneath his uniform. Navy psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, and after that, his mental health spiraled. On May 31st of 1986, 6-year-old Michelle Dorr ended up disappearing from a neighborhood in Silver Spring, Maryland. At the time, Haddon was just living 2 houses down, and she came to his house looking for a friend, and he let her in. He then led her upstairs, slashed her throat, drank her blood, tried to SA her corpse, ate some of her flesh, and then buried her body in a park. Within 9 days, detectives interviewed Haddon twice, and even though he was acting very suspicious, they didn't think he was the prime suspect. They thought her father was. 6 years later, in 1992, Haddon struck again. He was working as a gardener for a family, and he started to steal clothing and underwear from their 23-year-old daughter, Laura. On October 19th, Laura vanished, and the crime scene was pretty clear, except they looked at Laura's brush and they found a strand of synthetic hair from a wig. Laura's brother told police that he tried to talk to Haddon about her disappearance, but he sped off in his car, so he reported it to police, and that is when they found out that Haddon had bought braided rope, nylon cord, and duct tape days before her disappearance. Police had found a bloody pillowcase that belonged to Laura, and they found a partial thumbprint that belonged to Haddon. He was arrested and pled guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Years later, while he was in prison, he ended up talking to his cellmate and admitted to taking the life of 6-year-old Michelle. That cellmate told police, and he was given another 30 years in prison. Over the years, Haddon admitted to doing this to a dozen other people. Haddon would drink the blood of his victims because he was convinced it would turn him into a woman. He is currently in prison, serving 70 years.
2 best friends were forced down a hill, had their throats by a man who didn't even know he was being recorded. February 13th, Abigail Williams and Liberty German, ages 12 and 13, were dropped off by Liberty's sister Kelsey to a park near Delphi, Indiana. The girls hiked over a beautiful bridge overlooking Deer Creek, just goofing off, having fun, being regular teenagers. Liberty had actually posted a Snapchat of Abigail posing on the bridge overlooking the views, but we did not know that would be the last time anybody would ever see them. It's about 3:30, and Liberty's dad is waiting for the girls in his car, not even 5 minutes down the hike trail. He's supposed to be picking up the girls, but he notices something off because it's been a few minutes and neither of them are answering their phone. His heart starts beating a little faster, and he's getting this really uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. He keeps calling and calling, but no answer, so he gets out of the car and starts walking towards the trail. But every second that passes, he's wondering, where could they be? These girls are always in touch, and they're always on time. Now, the trail's only getting longer, and it's getting darker and darker outside, but there is this eerie silence in these woods that he cannot shake. Now, he's terrified, screaming out Liberty and Abigail's name, but the only response he is getting is the rustling of leaves. When he got closer to the bridge they were last seen, he had this feeling of fear just completely take over his body. Someone took his girls. After hours of searching the woods, the girls' families are growing hopeless trying to find them. Once they knew they weren't there, they immediately called 911, filed a missing child report. But when authorities went to go search the woods themselves, they found the bodies of these 2 best friends laid together, their throats into no more than 5 minutes away from where Liberty's dad was waiting for them. In between their bodies laid one single bullet that belonged to the weapon of their murderer, but that is all investigators could go on for the next few days, searching for whose weapon belongs to this bullet. But then on February 22nd, cops found a recording on Liberty's phone that actually gave me the most uncomfortable goosebumps. In the video, a man walks up to Abigail and Liberty, and with the most cold, commanding tone, he says, "Go down the hill." and then it just ends. Liberty's courage to record their final moments is the reason why 6 years later, these best friends got their justice. Investigators had finally found the weapon that matched that single bullet in between those girls' bodies in the home of Richard Allen. On October 26, 2022, he was finally arrested and found guilty of the murders of Liberty and Abigail after confessing his crimes to his wife over the phone. Always carry protection and be safe.
At first, people thought her body was just a mannequin lying on the grass because she'd been sliced in half and there was not a single drop of blood. Here's the really creepy part. A killer had carved a smile into her face. It was early 1974 in Los Angeles, and the morning started like any other until a woman walking with her baby in a pram came across something that she thought was just a mannequin lying on the grass. This body was naked, sliced in half, and had been drained of all blood. And she chillingly had what they call a Glasgow smile, like a grin cut into her face. The woman was nicknamed in the press the Black Dahlia because of her black hair, black outfits, and also there was a film out at the time called The Blue Dahlia. They found out she was actually 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. Now, she was a talented girl. She wanted to become an actress. She was really trying to make it, but she was really struggling. She had actually ended up turning to S work just to make ends meet. And honestly, nobody could really work out A, who the hell would have wanted to do something like this to her, and B, why. How the hell did she end up on the grass in just such a gruesome crime scene? It was really difficult to determine because she was actually a really, really private person. She very much kept herself to herself. But what she had done is told a couple of her friends prior to her murder that she was scared. In her last known days, she was spotted at a diner in San Diego with an unidentified man, but honestly, that was kind of just the nature of the job, so nobody really knows who this was. She had dated a guy in the past called Robert Manley, who some suspected to be involved in this murder. But he was a hardware salesman, and police felt that because of the nature of the crime, somebody like a surgeon or somebody with like medical training would have had to actually have done this to her. It was really precisely cut in half. Terrifyingly, police were sent taunting letters from the killer. You know, like those old horror film kind of style letters where every letter is cut out from like a newspaper or magazine. And they apparently even sent a package of like her personal documents to the police to taunt them even more. Things like her social security card. One suspect was Mark Hansen, who knew Elizabeth and he was a nightclub owner. But like I said, people felt that this was a medical professional. Two medical professionals that were suspected were Dr. Walter Bailey, who I believe knew Elizabeth's sister, and also Dr. George Hodel. And Dr. George Hodel was looked into in a lot of detail, and even his family suspected that he could have been the killer. But as of today, the case remains chillingly unsolved.
She is one of the most prolific female serial killers, dubbed the Blood Countess. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Elizabeth Bathory. Countess Elizabeth Bathory was born in the 1560s. She was born into a very influential, powerful, wealthy family. Both of her parents were in an incestuous relationship, meaning that they were blood relatives. It's believed that as a result of this incestuous relationship, Elizabeth throughout her childhood would suffer from seizures. Back then, a treatment for seizures included getting blood from someone who didn't suffer from seizures and rubbing that all over your face, all over your lips, and also drinking it. So this is something that Elizabeth would do from a very young age. As part of an arranged marriage, when Elizabeth was 15 years old, she would be married to 19-year-old Commander Ferenc, who also came from a very high-up family. As a wedding gift, Ferenc gifted Elizabeth his family's castle, and the couple lived in it together. It was situated in where is now Slovakia. Because of his duties as a commander within the Hungarian army, Ferenc was often away from the castle, and while he was away, Elizabeth would do the unthinkable. She had a torture chamber erected inside of the castle, and she would lure young girls to the castle with the promise of work, only to sadistically torture and eventually murder them. These young girls were the daughters of what Elizabeth deemed as peasants, and they were often between the ages of only 10 and 14 years old. But as Elizabeth's bloodlust grew, she would work her way up to higher class children, torturing and murdering some young girls that had been sent to her to learn etiquette. As part of the torture, she would do things such as savagely beat the girls. She would bite them so hard that their skin tore off. She would mutilate them, she would burn them with blistering hot irons. The girls would be starved, and on at least one occasion, Elizabeth had bit a girl so hard that her breast tore off, and she forced this young girl to eat her own breast. After horrifically torturing the girls, she would sometimes restrain them down on a table, tying them down so that they cannot get out. He would cover them in honey and in sugar and then leave the girls there, allowing the rats and the mice and whatever else to come and chew away at their flesh. And everything that I've just said there isn't even everything. This woman was a true monster. Once the girls were dead, they would be completely drained of their blood, which Elizabeth used to drink and to bathe in, believing that it would keep her young and beautiful. Her reign of terror was stopped when she began to prey on the daughters of very prestigious families. All of the families kind of grouped together and began to discuss their own individual daughters' disappearance, and the common denominator was Elizabeth. There had been rumours circulating about what Elizabeth was doing, but because these rumours were coming from lower class families, no one really put any stock into them. In December of 1610, a count travelled to the castle to investigate these claims, only to walk in on Elizabeth in the middle of torturing a young girl. He would go on to find around about 50 corpses scattered throughout the castle. And in Elizabeth's personal diaries, she claimed to have killed up to 650 girls. She would die at 54 years old, and because of her heinous crimes, she would be remembered as the Blood Countess. Even to this day, no one really knows the true motive behind why Elizabeth did such evil things. Was it really because she believed bathing and drinking the blood of young girls would mean that she would remain youthful and beautiful? Was there a sexual element to it, or was it a power trip? We may never know.
He happened to be on live right before he lost his life. On April 28th of this year, around 6:30 p.m., 25-year-old Jabari Johnson, also known online as Baba Skank, was on TikTok Live. He was on live playing a game with another TikToker in front of a local shop in St. Andrew, Jamaica. They were having a good time talking with people in the comment section like they would always do. During the live, it showed a man calmly approaching Jabari from behind on foot before taking his life in close range. He was hit multiple times in the head and upper body, and shouting can be heard in the background. Jabari is then seen falling to the ground and the live is ended. Mind you, the viewers of the live have witnessed all of this. The person is then seen fleeing on foot, and Jabari lost his life that day. St. Andrew North Police have launched an investigation, but there is no word if any arrests have been made.
While working on a Disney cruise ship, 24-year-old Rebecca Corium suddenly vanished. The Disney Wonder cruise ship that Rebecca was employed on left its port in LA and made its venture towards the Bahamas. The night before Rebecca vanished, she was at the cruise ship's bar with some friends, everything seemingly normal, until she did not show up for her 9 a.m. shift the following morning. A search was done, no one had seen her, no one could find her, so they decided to check the ship's surveillance footage. Footage showed Rebecca using one of the ship's phones at 5:45 a.m., looking really upset and distressed, wearing men's pajamas. A man came up to her, I guess because she was looking so upset, and asked if she was alright. Rebecca replied that she was fine, hung up the phone, walked away, and was never seen again. A Bahamas detective did an investigation upon the ship, which lasted 1 day, and came back with an explanation that Rebecca was swept overboard by a big wave. Despite the waters being normal and calm, the night that Rebecca disappeared and the walls aligned the ship were taller than Rebecca. The ship didn't even arrive back at the port until Rebecca had already been missing for 3 days, and almost immediately let all their passengers off and started a new voyage with a new set of passengers, so all the evidence and witnesses were now gone. 2 months after Rebecca vanished, there was activity on her credit card, and a few months after that, her Facebook password was changed. And I swear, there is no other information out there other than these 2 things just happened. Like, no one further investigated it. And if I'm wrong and there is some information out there and I just missed it, please let me know. There's a handful of theories online about what maybe have happened. I'm going to share them with you and then share my own theory, but please let me know your theory in the comments. Human trafficking has been brought up a lot online. She was a pretty young blonde, so I don't rule this out as a possibility. Some also say that it's possible Rebecca unalived herself because she was in a struggling relationship, but people that knew Rebecca said that she had future plans, she was a happy person, and this is not likely. Personally, and this is just speculation, but with the information we do know, I think it's possible that after drinking at the cruise ship's bar, Rebecca could have been SA'd the night that she vanished. A pair of ripped shorts that belonged to Rebecca were found on the floor of Rebecca's room, and she was seen on the phone looking very upset wearing men's clothing only a couple hours after going out for drinks with friends, reportedly looking really happy while out with her friends. So I don't know, I just feel like it lines up. And this is so frustrating, but even though she was using one of the ship's internal phones, I have seen no information about who she was speaking with, how long she was speaking with them for, and if they were interviewed, and what Rebecca was saying on the phone. And I don't know, I just feel like that would be really, really crucial information. And if I'm wrong and that information is out there and I just missed it, please let me know in the comments. Hundreds of people have suspiciously vanished from cruise ships. This is not the only case, this is just a part of a bigger issue. Whatever happened, I do think a proper investigation was not done and that Disney had a hand in covering up whatever happened to protect their image. But let me know what you think happened in the comments.
A missing North Carolina teenager was just found hidden under a trap door in this man's home in a completely different state. And what he has to say about it is horrifying.
She hid on her own free will. She was actually in the bed when the officers first come in there. Her grandma kicked her out. She didn't appear to be that age. She had all kinds of piercings.
In December, a 16-year-old girl left her grandparents' home in North Carolina after a fight and disappeared. She was officially reported missing on December 6th, and her grandparents feared the worst. But what they didn't know was that 3 weeks prior to her disappearance, a 34-year-old man named Zachary Jones found the girl online and started talking to her. And he actually lured her from her home after the fight with her grandparents. Zachary then drove the girl all the way back to his home in Lincoln County, Kentucky, where he repeatedly sexually assaulted her and gave her drugs. Fast forward to Christmas Day. Zachary's mom called 911 to report a domestic violence incident between Zachary and who she thought was his girlfriend. And when police arrived at the home, he said the girl was not there. He was quickly cuffed and placed in the back of a cop car after authorities found drugs in the home. And when they went back inside to search for the girl, they found something incredibly disturbing. Locked inside of a trap door hidden under a rug in Zachary's bedroom was a young girl who authorities say appeared very high. After investigating, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office realized that the young girl was reported missing nearly a month prior out of North Carolina. According to the girl, whose name has not been released, she said that Zachary initially told her that he was 19 online, but when she met up with him in North Carolina, he looked much older. It was there that he said he was 25, and it wasn't until they got all the way back to his home that she found out that he was actually 34. The girl said that Zachary was always armed with a gun and that he forced her to tell his family that she was 18. He also threatened to kill her many times and proceeded to sexually assault her and give her drugs, sometimes even strangling her during the assaults. When the girl was rescued, Zachary denied choking her and said that she hid in the trap door on her own free will. But the girl had very visible marks on her neck that proved otherwise. The victim also said that on their drive back to his house, they were pulled over by a cop, and Zachary told her that he would shoot the officer if they were asked to get out of the car. Zachary was arrested and is being held at the Pulaski County Jail, while the girl was taken to the hospital for treatment and was reunited with her grandparents. In an interview from jail, Zachary admitted to all of it, but said that she told him that she was 18. He said that she didn't look to be 16 as she had all sorts of piercings, and that he was helping her after her grandparents kicked her out, which was not true. Zachary is facing 30 different charges in just Kentucky, but he's also facing more charges in North Carolina as well. He's being held without bond, and judging by his lack of remorse, I truly hope that he never gets out, because this story is absolutely terrifying.
David Parker Ray has the name the Toy Box Killer for his practice of his victims in his homemade toy box dungeon. On March 22nd of 1999 in New Mexico, police received a 911 call. The person on the phone says, quote, "I'm calling for a young lady that ran into the house saying that she's been raped. She's got a chain on her and everything. Please send someone right away. She said they've been holding her for 3 days," end quote. This girl's name was Cynthia Vigil. Cynthia said she had been kidnapped by a man and forced into a sunken room, which was a soundproof trailer, where she was kept chained up to a post with nothing but a bucket for a toilet. In her 3 days of captivity, she was essayed and over and over again. When she did manage to escape, she ran out of the trailer wearing nothing but a collar and padlocked chains. She knocked on a neighbor's door looking for help, and they called 911. Cynthia would lead investigators to the home of David Parker Ray, and that would be the start of uncovering the sickening crimes he had been committing from the mid-1950s to the late 1990s. David Parker Ray was born in New Mexico in 1939. He had a little sister and was mainly raised by his grandfather, who was not a good man. David also often saw his father, who treated him in a way that no human being should be treated, and did absolutely nothing for him but provide him with magazines with picture of girls that a child should not have. David also often witnessed his father being aggressive and violent towards his mother. As a little boy, David experienced a lot of bullying for his shyness around girls, which only made the insecurities that he already had worse. And to cope with his internal struggles, David turned to using substances at a young age. Going back to the magazines his father gave to David, you know what kind of magazines I'm talking about. Well, David, as a young boy, he's looking at these images that have quite a dominance to them. He's seeing these things that are already not good for a child to see, but also adding on a violent aspect to them with things such as ropes, blindfolds, handcuffs, etc. And in his head, as young as 9 years old, from things that he has seen and experienced while his brain is still developing, he's connecting girls, being intimate with girls, violence, and he's looking at them all as the same thing and begins having fantasies about doing things with girls, being dominant while being intimate with them, having power over them, and making them suffer. Even as a little kid, it excited him, the thought of putting a female in harm's way. If you asked David when the first time was that he chose to make his sick fantasies come true, he would say, also, by the way, if you're not looking at the screen, maybe look at the screen. I'll put the quote up because I'm going to have to bleep a lot of this out. But he would say, quote, "I've been ever since I was old enough to and tie little hands behind their back," end quote. And we don't know for sure when the first time was that he acted on his sick fantasies, but David has said that at 14 years old, he kidnapped a girl, took her to a wooded area, tied her to a tree, essayed her, and hurt her in multiple ways. His sick fantasies continued all throughout high school, while he was in the army, after he was discharged from the army, and into his job as a mechanic for the New Mexico State Parks. That job he would have for the rest of his adult life. Throughout his adult life, David was married and divorced 4 times. He had 2 daughters, and eventually ended up alone in Elephant Butte, a city in New Mexico. Don't know if I pronounced that correctly. In that city, he was a very well-liked guy, a nice guy, a good mechanic, a good employee, well-respected. He was just your nice guy next door. Of course he was, but he was also living a double life. Of course he was. He had this routine going on of going out on the streets looking for women. He would take them back to his place under the impression that they were going to be doing you know what, and they would be, but not with their consent. He would give them substances to make them unconscious. He would have his way with them, doing unspeakable things to them until he was satisfied. He would often film these situations, record everything, and then sell those films to other people with sick minds like his. Then when he was done, when his victims were still out of it, he would either drive and throw them out on the side of the road, or sometimes he would drive across the border and sell them into. And that was his nightly routine. How despicable is that? It got to a point where David thought he needed to take this a step further. He needed a dedicated place to be able to do whatever he wanted to do, and he decided that place would be a white trailer. And given that he saw women as objects and he wanted to treat them as such, he decided that he would buy this trailer, he would make it soundproof, and make it his very own toy box that he would keep stocked with things such as whips, chains, straps, clamps, plenty of sharp weapons, medical devices, electric shock machines, and toys. So disturbing, it makes me physically ill. In his trailer, he also had a chair that you would find in a female doctor's office to position his victims in that way, as well as a wooden contraption that he would use to immobilize his victims. I'm literally gonna puke. On the wall, he had a sign that said Satan's Den and a list of his favorite methods. He had cameras and tape recorders for him to film everything. He would also play a tape recorder of him speaking, saying the most out-of-pocket, disturbing, diabolical things I've literally ever heard for his victims to listen to while they were suffering. It is thought that in this toy box, David terrorized many women with these tools for many years with the help of accomplices who are alleged to have included several of the women that he was dating. Yep, he would bring his girlfriends in to help him with his victims, and another one of his main accomplices was his daughter, Jessie, one of the 2 daughters that he had in one of his marriages, and her boyfriend at the time, a man named Roy. I couldn't find too much information on if Jessie lived with David or didn't. It's kind of unclear. I think that she was raised by the mother, but often did spend time with David, obviously, and possibly lived with him on and off starting from when she was around the age of 8 years old. And when she got older, she just became daddy's little helper, basically. His other biggest accomplice was David's girlfriend at the time, Cindy Hendy. So you had 4 people in on going out to find women to bring into this toy box. One of the craziest things about this this guy is that we don't know who all of his victims were. We don't even know when his crime spree began. But it is believed that it started some point during the mid-1950s. As far as his number of victims, we don't know that for sure either. But it's estimated that he ended the lives of at least 50 women. He once told an ex-girlfriend of his that he ended the life of one woman a year, every year for 40 years. Unbelievable. Shocking. It gives me the chills. We do know at least 2 of his victims who survived. One was a woman named Kelly. Videotape evidence was found in the trailer of Kelly in a terrified state, being essayed and very clearly suffering at the hands of David and his girlfriend. Kelly was a friend of David's daughter, Jessie. And one night in the summer of 1996, she got in a fight with her husband. She went out to hang out with Jessie at a pub to get her mind off things. Jessie gave her something to make her loopy and out of it, and the next thing that Kelly knew, she was in this trailer with a dog collar and a leash on, and she was essayed for 2 days until David was bored. He then took a sharp weapon across her neck and dumped her on the side of the road, assuming that she would not wake up to see another day, but he was wrong. Kelly survived the brutal attack. She told her husband what happened, but her husband didn't believe her, nor did the police. It wouldn't be proven that Kelly was telling the truth until that videotape was found in that trailer years later. The second victim was Cynthia, the girl we spoke about at the very beginning of this video, the girl who escaped and became the reason the toy box was discovered. Cynthia was chosen as a victim after David Parker complained to his girlfriend Cindy that he was going to be lonely because Cindy was going out of town for a while. So David and Cindy thought, you're going to be so lonely. Let's just go out, find you a girl that you can keep captive. It'll be perfect. And that's what they did. Cynthia was abducted after David pretended to be an undercover cop and fake arrested her and put her in the back of his car. He took her to the trailer, tied her up, and used everything he had in that trailer to inflict pain onto her with the help of his girlfriend. All while David played the tape recording of his voice speaking in detail of what she would be forced to endure. On that tape, he instructed that Cynthia was only to refer to David as master and never speak unless she was spoken to first. Then he told her each and every way he was going to hurt her. On her 3rd day of captivity, when David was off being the mechanic that he was at work, Cindy, his girlfriend, accidentally left the keys to Cynthia's restraints on a table that Cynthia could reach, and she did reach them and used that to free herself. Cindy attempted to stop her escape, but Cynthia was able to get away, thank God. She ran off looking for help and found the angel of a person that called 911 for her. Cynthia led authorities to the trailer where David and Cindy were immediately arrested. And after obtaining a search warrant for David's house and his trailer, they found everything. They found diaries written by David describing numerous murders in detail. They also found hundreds of pieces of jewelry, clothing, and other personal effects that belonged to his victims. However, the remains of his victims have never been found. David Parker was sentenced to 224 years in prison, but get this. He passed away of a heart attack on May 28th of 2002 after serving one day of his sentence. He was 62 years old at the time. David's daughter Jessie was sentenced to 9 years, but she walks free today. Cindy Hendy, the girlfriend, was sentenced to 36 years, but she has also been released. In regards to the case, the FBI stated in 2011, quote, "We're still getting good leads. As long as we're getting those leads and as long as the exposure in the press keeps generating interest in this case, we're going to keep investigating this," end quote. I have no words. Monster of a man. I don't even know what to say about him. That is all I have for today's case. Let me know your thoughts on it. I'm sure they will be very similar to my thoughts. But I love you guys so much. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to today's horrific story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy. And I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Your pregnant wife is missing and you're sat at home paying for adult TV channels. It was Christmas Eve in Modesto in California in 2002. Lacey and Scott Peterson were a married couple expecting their first child. Now, this was a baby that they had already named Connor. Now, Lacey was very pregnant. Actually, she was 8 months along, so they didn't have long to wait at all. And they'd already prepared a gorgeous nursery for their little baby, a blue nautical themed room, which in hindsight, and if you know this case, is just so chilling. Lacey was an incredibly smart, beautiful young woman. She had so many friends and her family absolutely adored her, which is why they all raced round to the family home on Christmas Eve when she was reported missing. Now, if you want all of the background information and the lead up to the disappearance, I go into loads of detail on the Bourne investigation, but we're going to take it from when Scott said that he got home that day. Now, he later told officers that he had gone on like a planned fishing trip on Christmas Eve, leaving his pregnant wife at home, and had got home just before 5 p.m. He said he took all of his clothes off after this fishing trip and just washed them immediately. He then showered showered and ate pizza before telling anybody that Lacey seemed like she was missing. He had emptied a mop bucket, strangely, and then called Lacey's mum to see where she was, interestingly never calling Lacey herself. He had also noticed that their dog was walking around still on the lead. Now, he said that Lacey that morning had said she was going to go and walk the dog, so it was a little bit strange that the dog was just there with the lead on and no Lacey. He said that day he had left the house at around 9:30 a.m. and like I said, Lacey was planning to walk the dog. He said he got his boat from his work warehouse and driven for a fishing trip. Investigators later found that Scott had left a voicemail on Lacey's phone during his fishing trip. Now, it was something along the lines of, "Hey, beautiful, I'm not going to be back in time to pick up that thing that we agreed. I was hoping that you would pick it up. See you later, sweetie. Love ya." It was very sickly sweet, and obviously a lot of different people have different opinions about this phone call, but in my mind, I just felt like it was a bit too staged. And when investigators searched the home, they found no evidence of forced entry or a struggle or really anything untoward in the house. And Scott was very, very quick to provide an alibi. He actually got his receipt out for his fishing trip. And other elements of Scott's behaviour really raised eyebrows, always referring to Lacey in the past tense, not showing up to do TV appeals where the whole rest of the family turned up, and seeming very calm and sometimes even like joking around. His bank account also later revealed that while his wife and unborn child were missing, he was sat at home paying for adult TV stations. There was a bunch of other things as well, which I go into on the pod, but then a new character enters the mix. This is Amber Fry. Scott had been having an affair in the lead up to his wife's disappearance. And shockingly, Amber revealed that prior to Lacey even going missing, Scott had told her that he did have a wife previously and she had died. Now, Amber was a massage therapist. She actually seemed like a really lovely woman. She didn't know that he was married with a child on the way. She was a single mum who had met Scott in the November, and she'd been told by multiple people he was single. As soon as she saw what she thought was her boyfriend on TV with this missing wife, she rang police and agreed to work with them in secret to record her conversations with Scott. And Scott carried on lying to her. He never mentioned about his wife being missing. He actually just acted like he was totally normal, living a normal life. He even pretended that he was spending New Year's Eve in Paris at a party when he was actually at a candlelit vigil for his missing wife. And when it all came out in the news about Scott's affair, he decided to go on Diane Sawyer. And honestly, the claims that he made on that TV show were unbelievable. He claimed that Lacey knew about the affair that he was having. He'd already told her about it and she was fine with it. She wasn't upset or angry. He maintained he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance. And then in April the following year, an absolutely heartbreaking discovery. A nearly full-term fetus and a female adult torso were found washed up on the shore. They were tragically confirmed via DNA as Lacey and Connor. Now, immediately this went from missing persons case to homicide investigation, and Scott was pretty much the only suspect. There was a bunch of suspicious stuff about Scott's warehouse that I go into in more detail on the podcast episode, but essentially there were rings found on the floor that suggested that anchors were made, and also a pair of pliers were found in the boat that had Lacey's hair wrapped around them. Scott also started acting extremely sus, even dyeing his hair and growing his beard, and when he was ultimately arrested on suspicion of murder, he was actually found to have like survival gear in his car and a large amount of cash. Police found that before Lacey had even been found, Scott had actually sold her car and made calls to try and sell the pair's home. Now, Scott was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree murder and was sentenced to the death penalty, but did have the death penalty overturned on like a technicality. Scott is still appealing, and in part 2 of the pod ep, I go into some other evidence that some people believe confirms that Scott is innocent.
These two best friends were enjoying a day out on an Australian beach when they would be sadistically murdered, and their case is still unsolved. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murders of Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock. In 1958, the Schmidt family emigrated from Germany over to Australia with the promise and the hope of living a brand new life. The family consisted of 2 parents and 6 children, one of them being a then 8-year-old Marianne. The family lived in some immigrant housing in New South Wales before permanently settling in Ryde, Sydney. Sadly, however, soon after their arrival in Ryde, Sydney, Marianne's father would fall incredibly ill and then eventually die. Marianne would be the one to step up and help her mother raise her younger siblings and also help her with day-to-day life as well. Her mum didn't speak English very good, and so a lot of responsibilities fell onto Marianne, who never complained. Living on the same street as Marianne was Christine Sharrock, who lived with her grandparents after her own father died, and the 2 young girls became very fast friends. They were both the same age. Some people would say that they resembled each other, and they had very similar personalities. They were both quiet, shy, respectful, responsible, and polite. They would spend all of their free time together, either listening to music or going to the beach. They were inseparable. On the 11th of January 1965, Marianne's mother was in hospital recovering from an operation that she had, and so Marianne and Christine decided that they were going to take Marianne's younger siblings for a day out at the beach. Marianne and Christine are both now 15, and the younger siblings ranged from 10-year-old to 5-year-old. They set off at around about 8:30 a.m. and they had to take 2 trains to get to Cronulla Beach. When they arrived, the young children enjoyed playing in the warm sand, in the sea, and nibbling on the picnic that Marianne had prepared for them. One of the children would later recall seeing Marianne and Christine talking to another young boy who was about their age. He had a knife on a spear and was crab catching. After a couple of hours of sitting on the beach at around about 1 in the afternoon, Marianne and Christine told the kids that they were all going to get up and go for a lovely walk along to Wanda Beach. Over to Wanda Beach, it's all kind of one long stretch of flat sand. However, it is quite some distance. It would be about a 20-minute walk. Leaving behind their bags, the 6 all set out on their way. However, this walk was an uncomfortable one. The wind was picking up, and it was reported that the wind was blowing at around about 25 miles an hour. It was whipping the legs of the younger children, it was making them cold, and it just wasn't an enjoyable walk. Marianne and Christine sat the children down at some sort of sand dune, wrapped them up in a towel, and give them Christine's portable radio, which she'd only just got for Christmas. They told the children to wait there. They would go back to the beach, retrieve their bags, and then come back to see them. But the 2 teenagers would walk off in the opposite direction. They would walk towards the Wanda sand dunes. The witness would later recall seeing both of the girls walking along the sand dunes, and one of the girls, we're not sure which one it was, kept on looking over her shoulder, almost as if she was conscious that someone was following them. This man observed the girls for a couple of seconds, looked behind them, saw that no one was following them, and then went about his day. What we know now is that the girls would be viciously attacked. Marianne would be stabbed a total of 15 times, and one of these stabs went directly to her heart. She sustained injuries so severe on her neck that she was almost decapitated. Christine tried to run, probably running for her life and screaming, but the killer managed to catch up to her. He whacked her over the head with a blunt instrument so hard that it fractured her skull. He stabbed her 6 times in a frenzy before dragging her body back to where he had Marianne, leaving a trail of blood in the sand. Now, with both of the girls in front of him, either dead or on death's door, he attempted to R-word them, leaving behind semen DNA. The young siblings that had been left behind waiting for the 2 girls eventually got bored of waiting. They had sat and sat and sat for hours, so eventually they got up, they went back to the beach, retrieved their own bags, and got the last train home at 6:30 p.m. When Marianne and Christine didn't return home by 8:30 p.m, they would be reported missing. The following day, a man who was out walking with his 2 nephews would discover what he thought was a mannequin buried underneath the sand. However, it's never a mannequin. He actually discovered the bodies of 15-year-old Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock. One of the girls was found buried face down in the sand, and the other girl was found lay on her right side. During their autopsies, it was found that Christine had food in her stomach alongside a low blood alcohol level. The blood alcohol level that she had would sort of be the equivalent of drinking one beer, but both of these were strange because Christine didn't have anything to eat at the beach when the other children were having a picnic, and both she and Marianne weren't drinkers. They were very responsible, they didn't drink alcohol, and they would have never drank alcohol when they were watching the younger siblings. So why did she have a blood alcohol level? Why did she have food in her stomach? One theory that was put out there that maybe the girls had met up with someone at the sand dunes. They sat, they chilled a little bit, eating and maybe even drinking before it went west and they were horrifically killed. The siblings were questioned by police and even taken back to the beach to reenact what happened, to show police where they were left and where they saw the girls walking. And it would be 7-year-old Wolfgang who dropped a bomb, giving police their biggest lead. He told police that he had watched Marianne and Christine walk away, but that they were being followed by the young boy that he had seen earlier with the spear and the knife catching crabs, only now he didn't have the spear and the knife was in his belt. This young boy, who was described as having light coloured hair, wearing grey trousers and a blue towel over his shoulder, was trying to get the attention of both of the girls, but they were ignoring him, and this was really irritating him. His face was full of anger. Because the description that Wolfgang gave police was very vague, it made so many of the young boys in Sydney at that time suspects. Over the course of the investigation, the police would interview over 16,000 people and over 5,000 of them were considered suspects. With a $10,000 reward up for grabs, they were absolutely bombarded with tips and with leads, but none of them led anywhere. The only hope that they had was the DNA sample. When they extracted the DNA sample, there wasn't much that they could do with it because it was 1965 and they just didn't have the technology that we have now. However, over the years, technology has progressed so much where we can do all sorts with it. We have loads of databases, we have genetic genealogy. However, it was reported in 2014 that this semen DNA, the key to unlocking this crime, had been lost. Unless someone confesses or comes forward with information, it's likely that we will never know who murdered Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock.
What's a crime that happened near you that everyone should know about? I'll go first. This is Kai Zhuang. He's a Chinese foreign exchange student that was staying in Riverdale, Utah when he was cyber kidnapped last week. Kai was reported missing by his high school in Riverdale last Thursday after his family in China told school officials that they received a ransom note and a photo of Kai being held captive and in danger. The ransom note demanded $80,000, which his family paid. Upon investigating, Riverdale police went to the home of Kai's host family, but according to them, they had no idea that Kai was missing. They told authorities that he was sleeping in his bed Wednesday night and could hear him in his room Thursday morning. Police initially thought that he had been forcibly taken from his host home and was being held against his will, but that was not the case. Just a week prior, Kai was stopped by police in Provo, Utah, where they were concerned for his safety for some reason. He was purchasing camping gear and he was ultimately returned to his host family. After learning about this encounter, police used phone data and bank records to piece together where Kai could have possibly gone, because at this point it seemed as if he was trying to go off-grid. Just Sunday morning, Kai was found alive in a makeshift tent in the Utah mountains just outside of Brigham City. According to police, he was very scared and cold as there was no source of heat in the tent outside of a blanket. He also had very little food and water. Inside the tent, police also found multiple phones, which they believe he used to take the photos that were sent to his family in China. Kai told police that he was told by the cyber kidnappers to isolate himself, which he agreed to because he was scared that they were going to hurt him or his family. He said that he was being controlled and manipulated by these kidnappers for weeks, even during the encounter with Provo police. But he didn't tell them or his host family because he was scared. Riverdale police state that he was specifically targeted because he was a foreign exchange student, and he became the subject of an international online kidnapping scheme. After his rescue, he was cleared medically at the scene, made contact with his family back home, and he requested a warm cheeseburger to eat. According to the FBI, cyber kidnapping schemes are happening more and more across the US, and these cyber kidnappers are specifically targeting Chinese exchange students online, threatening their families back home. If you don't know, cyber kidnapping is when an online kidnapper or attacker tells a victim to isolate themselves and to provide them with photos as if they were being held captive. They then send these photos to the victim's family members in exchange for payment, and the victims usually go along with this out of fear of themselves or their families being harmed. Authorities are urging anyone who may be a victim of cyber kidnapping to stop contact with the suspect, don't send them money, and to immediately contact local authorities.
She threw her 20-month-old baby away like a piece of trash. Baby Quentin was found unalive in the middle of a landfill because his mother decided to throw him in a dumpster. This case sickens me to my core the way this mother treated her own son. Trigger warning. In Savannah, Georgia, on October 5th, 2022, Leilani Simon texted Quentin's babysitter at 5 a.m. saying, "You're not taking care of Quentin today." The babysitter, Diana, found this extremely odd because she always takes care of Quentin, even on Leilani's days off. But she says, okay, she moves on. And then again at 9 a.m., Leilani texts her, "Have you seen Quentin?" This worries Diana, and so she immediately goes to Leilani's house to try to help her find Quentin. Maybe he's stuck in a cabinet, who knows? But then she refuses to let her in. Leilani's boyfriend had called 911 around the same time, and you can literally hear Leilani screaming and crying in the back. Cops arrived. She told him she believes Quentin was abducted by her baby daddy, Bubba, because she accidentally left the door open. When they questioned Bubba, he was like, "I did not take my son. I live over an hour away and I was at work." CCTV footage had actually confirmed his alibi, so he was no longer even a suspect for Quentin's disappearance. Bubba had actually described Leilani to cops as a compulsive liar, a cheater, and a who only cared about her next hit. Bubba had actually went to Leilani's house and caught her doing snow and drinking adult beverages, laughing it up, smiling, partying, as though there aren't cops out looking for her son. Then a few weeks after that, Leilani and her mom were seen at a restaurant flirting with bartenders, living it up. Police had noticed that Leilani's demeanor wasn't very like, "My child is missing," but more like, "Yeah, I left the door open and he's gone. I'm pretty sure it was my baby daddy, so look into him." The way she was handling herself screamed red flags to police, so they started interviewing her and her boyfriend Daniel. When they had checked Daniel's alibi, he was good. He was at work at around 6 a.m., so clearly he had nothing to do with Quentin's disappearance. But Leilani, however, shorty was going back and forth with who she was with and where she was during the time of his disappearance. The first few interviews, Leilani stood firm on the fact that she went out the night before with a friend named Misty and accidentally left the front door open, resulting in Quentin's disappearance. And then she was like, "Actually, I don't even remember hanging out with Misty or what I did that day." But when police had asked her if she was at a dumpster that same morning, she was like, "Yeah, I was just throwing out spoiled pasta." But then she flipped her story again and told them, "Wait, no, it was actually Daniel at the dumpster, not me." Completely incompetent to the fact that they literally have footage of her at the dumpster. Police had actually found out that CPS workers were constantly involved, questioning the children's safety with their own mother, to the point where Leilani didn't even have custody of her kids. Her mother, Billie Jo Howell, did. Now, this is the shit that really made my jaw drop. It turns out around the same time Quentin went missing, Leilani had lost a child support battle, forcing her to pay $150 every month to her mother. But if a child was to, say, I don't know, go missing, they would have to lower the child support cost. Remember when I told y'all Leilani was seen on camera throwing pasta out into a dumpster the same morning Quentin disappeared? Police did not want to believe it, but they started thinking whatever was in that bag Leilani had at that dumpster was not rotten pasta, but maybe Quentin's body. So they invested over $225,000 into FBI agents to investigate, helicopters and drones to scout the area, search and rescue teams digging through acres of trash in a landfill where Quentin's body might have been dumped. This baby boy had so many people looking for him, but sadly on November 18th, the body of Quentin Simone was found in a landfill, completely unrecognizable. I truly wish I could show you the images, but they are too graphic for TikTok. They failed Quentin Simone, but I also feel so bad for his babysitter, Diana. There is a video of Leilani's mom, Billie, screaming at Diana, accusing her of taking Quentin.
"I thought you were a woman of God. You got Quentin? Do you have Quentin? I don't have Quentin. Maybe you do. Maybe you do. You got it."
Leilani Simone was arrested on November 21st and was just found guilty of first-degree murder to her son Quentin Simone today. Quentin was only 20 months old, just learning to walk and talk, when his mother Leilani took away his chance to grow up, let alone make it to preschool. Please be safe and always take care of your children and loved ones, not the other way around.
This is the story of Devin Michael. Tracy Tavares was born in New Mexico. Growing up, she suffered from sexual abuse by the hands of her mother's boyfriend, Robert Baker. Now, Robert was convicted of these sex offenses, but as Tracy got older, she ended up marrying Robert. He then introduced her to the adult film industry. She moved to San Fernando Valley. Her screen name was Nikki Fairchild, and from the year 2000 to 2012, she did over 140 adult films. Now, around 2012, she was seeking a clean slate. Her and Robert had divorced. She had retired from the adult film industry, and she had legally changed her name to Devin Michaels. That same year, she had married her then boyfriend, Jonathan Willett. 47-year-old Jonathan is an entrepreneur born in Tokyo, Japan. He had 2 older children from a previous relationship. His family settled in Las Vegas, Nevada around 1995, and he was very popular in Vegas. He sold timeshares on Vegas Strip for 20 years. And right before the pandemic, he started another business called the Vegas Moving Guy. He would use his truck and ride around Vegas to help people who was in need. He also founded JW Marketing. So Jonathan was getting to the bag. The two went on to have 2 daughters of their own, and their marriage seemed just fine until 2015. Jonathan's older son, 19-year-old Davier, would help Devin out with his younger sisters a lot, and the two started spending a lot of alone time together. Maybe too much alone time together, because the two crossed that boundaries. Yes, Devin started sleeping with her husband's 19-year-old son. Mind you, she's 36 at this time. Jonathan and Devin didn't get a divorce until 3 years later in 2018. As soon as Jonathan moved out, his son, Devier, moved in, but he's playing it like, oh, I'm just going to live with my stepmom, help her take care of my sisters, this and that. But he not only took his father's ex-wife, he moved in. They're in a full-blown relationship, but they took it a step further. In November of 2021, these two got married. And Devin was happy. She loved their family dynamic, but it was short-lived because in October of 2022, when she dropped her 2 girls off to daycare, the daycare worker noticed a bruise on one of the girls' legs. The worker immediately reported it to CPS, and when CPS questioned Devin about it, she admitted, yes, me and my husband, who is Devier. Mind you, the girls are calling Devier their stepfather. He's their brother. But she admitted to CPS that she had whooped the girls for drinking apple juice or something like that. But they took the girls away from her ass in November of 2022 and put them in the custody of their father. Now, even though Devin loved his little girls, he didn't love the fact that they were away from their mother like that. So he figured they needed a better family dynamic. So he said, I'm just going to move back in the house with Devin. And he gave her a call and said, I'm just going to move back in because we got to get these kids situated. Now, Devier is panicking because not only is him and Devin in a relationship, they're married. So in early 2023, he told his father. He told his father that him and Devin were not only in a relationship, but they were a married couple. And Jonathan is shocked by this. His flabber is gasted. But in May of 2023, Jonathan like, you know what? I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I'm trying to get my daughter's lives stabilized. Devier, I'm moving in. You gonna have to get out. And Devin is low-key furious about this. She's agreeing, but she not really agreeing. She felt if Jonathan moved back in, it would destroy her marriage with Devier, but the plan was already in action. By the time August had rolled around, Jonathan was already packing his stuff, preparing to move. And Devin called Jonathan on August 6, 2023, saying, you know what? I'm going to help you pack. Jonathan was living with his mother at the time, and Devin arrived at the house around 8 p.m. to help put stuff in his moving truck. But at around 8 a.m. on August 7th, Jonathan's mother was calling 911. The smell of bleach woke Jonathan's mother up that morning, and when she went to his room, she seen her son's body wrapped partially in bloody blankets. His head was gone. She told the police that she had last seen her son at around 10 p.m. And when she got up to use the restroom around 1 a.m., she seen Devin coming out of his room with some dishes. And she said that she scared her a little bit. And Devin had told her that Jonathan was passed out drunk and that she was just going to finish this herself. Now, when the police went to go question Devin, she did admit, yes, I was there helping him move, but he was fine when I left. He was standing outside the garage smoking a cigarette, and the police didn't have anything to go on. So they had to let her go. It wasn't until 8 days later when they was back at her house putting her in handcuffs. And while Devin is in custody, the police are searching her home, and boy, what did they find? They found Jonathan's wallet and his keys to his car and driver's license in her underwear drawer. They found stuff stolen from Jonathan's room in a plastic bag. The knot tied on the bag had Devin's DNA on it. They also found his bloody cell phone outside of Devin's home under some rocks by her car. With that overwhelming amount of evidence presented to her, she just went on and confessed. She told the police that she had hit Jonathan in the back of the head with a wooden candle while he was laying on his stomach texting. She said he quickly fell limp. Now, the medical examiner said that his head was removed after he had died. Now, off the record, Devin said that his head was taken off with a power saw, and she had threw his head in a dumpster. His head was never recovered, but they couldn't use that because they said she had already asked for a lawyer. She had pled guilty to second-degree murder. She had a 15-year plea deal on the table. She took it, but then recanted her whole statement. She said, you know what? No, I don't want to do this. I'm innocent and I'm going to fight for it. Her trial started in November of 2025, and it was the most roller coaster trial. It's on YouTube. It's long and it's up and down. She's having breakdowns, but she was blaming it all on her husband, Devier. Her defense team was saying, how could this 5'3" woman handle a power saw cutting off a 170-pound man's head? They were saying that it had to be Devier, and because of his job, he was a home security system technician, and he had access to power saws and those type of power tools. But the cell phone data and text messages shows that Devier was at home with his sister daughters the night of the crime, and he was texting Devin, hey, I'm putting the girls to bed. What you doing? But her defense crumbled. She was sentenced to 28 years to life in prison. She will be eligible for parole after 28 years. Parole is really crazy. And as for you, now, even though you seem remorseful for taking your daddy's bitch, but boy, you was 19 when this all started. You knew better. You knew better. And then you gonna marry her? And you playing stepdaddy to your sisters. Cabeza. Gone. Boy, what the fuck? Man, what type of twisted ass story was this?